Great. So, well, welcome to this She's Unshakable podcast. I am so excited for our chat today and so excited to hear from you as well. So big welcome, and it's so lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here with you.
Super excited that you're here too. So, as you know, the first question I always ask my interviewees is, what is your morning routine? What do you do to set yourself up for success for the day?
I am a huge advocate of what I like to call my personal empowerment system, right? And so that includes the morning ritual. And for me, it absolutely has to have meditation in there. And also my super powerful, in fact, I had a little bit of a boost, my super powerful smoothie with all ginger and turmeric and mint and celery juice and the whole 9 yards. So it's really, really important, I think, to start your day with whatever feels like a positive trigger for you. And so for me, it's mind, body, soul, spirituality, trigger something wherever I am, even if things have to be slightly different. If I hit one of those areas, then my bar is just super high for the whole day.
Awesome. So do you change that around, or do you always do meditation, or?
I always do meditation. Sometimes I have to change how long of a meditation I can do, right? Or if, say, sometimes I'm traveling or in an environment that I would have to slightly change that, it's really deliberate focused thought that I'm going for, right? Not just total relaxation. So that can be accomplished by going even on a walk out in nature. If I can get out and really deliberately focus and set my intentions, and with the gratitude, for example, it's not like a grocery shop list, right? It's not just a list of like, well, I'm grateful for my house, I'm grateful for my clothes, and I'm grateful for my mom, and I'm grateful for my kids. It's not like that. It really is sinking into the actual feeling, the emotion of it. It's, I am so grateful that when I wake up, I'm immediately aware of this incredible, the sensation of these clean sheets right around me, and the smells, the first smells of the morning, and the little one becoming aware of the sun coming through. And I'm so grateful that I am waking up feeling excited about my day, looking forward to my day. So it's getting myself into that higher state, like right from the get-go, and exercising those positive emotion muscles that really, again, set those positive triggers just so high that even if I get a bump, it's super temporary and it's much easier to come back up from it. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, oh, absolutely. I 100% agree with that as well. I think I notice it because my morning routine is fairly, I mean, it's not rigid, but I tend to try and do the same things, whether that's meditation and then journaling, reading a little bit of my book, and then getting some movement and some exercise in there, drinking water. And I find that if I miss some of that, or even especially if I don't meditate or journal or like read my affirmations or read my mission statement in the morning, it totally will set a different style for my day, and it will be completely different to one where I'm ready to go. I wake up early and I get everything done, and it's such a different feeling of the whole day essentially. So I know exactly what you mean.
It really, really is. And I know that when I introduce it to some clients who don't normally have that piece, and even some people are really surprised to hear that meditation, because for me, my personal empowerment system, yes, it starts in the morning, but there are touchbacks throughout the day, and then there's closure at the end of the day, of course, right? And so many of my clients who haven't done meditation, will say, I don't have time to meditate or something like that. But what they don't realize is that they can begin to introduce themselves by meditating right before they go to sleep, as they go to sleep. And we still get those benefits even as we drift into sleep. And I don't know about you, but I've found that when I go to bed and I meditate as I'm going to sleep, and I set the intention at that point to wake up with something resolved or figured out, some strategy put together, even as I'm sleeping, I can be aware that my mind is playing with this, and I can wake up rested, but with the solution right there ready to go. And it's, I just think meditation is phenomenal.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Yeah, I'd have to agree. Even if it's just 5 minutes a day, can
Yes.
really have a huge monumental advance on life for sure. Okay, so let's get into it. Obviously, I really want you to share your story with my listeners and everything that you've been through with your girl, and obviously that whole journey, and everything that you've done obviously since then with your business and stuff too. So let's start from the beginning, and tell us a little bit about you and your story.
Sure. So really, about 5 years ago, even though I was interested and really had immersed myself in what I call the inner game skills, right? Everything from energy to martial arts, Aikido, law of attraction, you name it. I was fascinated by them, but I didn't appreciate them. My life at that point was really life on a hamster wheel. I was a single mompreneur. I had raised my children as a single mompreneur. So I felt like I was chasing all the time. I was chasing something. I was chasing more time. I was chasing more money. I was chasing more self-esteem, you name it. And it felt like I was trying to be so many things to everyone else that I lost myself in the process. And I had very little time for things that fed my passion, and I had no clue what my purpose was, other than my children. And then one Friday afternoon, the phone rang at 3:15. My youngest daughter had been on a fellowship. She'd graduated from Yale University the spring before, and she'd accepted a fellowship with Yale to work in Peru for a year to help build schools and work with the native population. So she'd finished the first segment, and she and the young woman who was going to be the boss for the next section decided that they would take a 2-week excursion to Colombia, South America. And so I picked up the phone, and I heard this young woman's voice on the other side of the phone, and she briefly introduced herself as Schuyler's friend. And of course, my mind started racing. And she said, I don't know how to tell you this, but there's been an accident and you need to get down here to Colombia immediately. And so, as you can imagine, my mind just went at 1,000 miles an hour. There was part of me that was very much in denial, but there was the other part that just kept saying, this is too big for me. I'm not qualified to handle this. What do I do? What do I do? And it was almost like there were two versions of me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it was interesting. I mean, at first she was real vague about what had happened. So she and Schuyler, the day before they were supposed to return to Peru, had gone on this whitewater rafting excursion with a bunch of other tourists, and they'd gone through the real dangerous part and made it into the swimming grotto, which was this beautiful part of the river, very calm. And there was a ledge where everyone could jump and dive. And of course, Sky, being the 22-year-old daredevil that she was 100% in on that one. And so what happened, apparently, is that on one of the times when she was climbing up the cliff to get to the ledge, somehow someone above her dislodged one of the boulders, and it was a direct hit right between her eyes. And this incredible rock boulder cracked open her skull, but in the process knocked her off the cliff onto the boulders below, which fractured her spine and fractured her scapulas and snapped her right thigh, and absolutely pulverized her left ankle. So at first they thought that she had been instantly killed, but then they realized that there was still movement. Her lungs had been crushed, but there was still movement in her chest. So then became the race to get her back into the raft, get the raft over to the beach where they could get it up the side of a mountain to a dirt road where their van had been able to come, load her little body into the back of the van, and then start the 40-minute journey back to a paved road where an ambulance could meet with them. And then from there to find a hospital in Colombia that actually had an ICU, because most hospitals in Colombia do not. And so I was getting the call, and I finally asked this young woman if there was a chance that she wasn't going to make it. And I will never forget just that silence when I asked the question. And then she just said, "We just need to get you down here as soon as possible." And so I hung up from that call and basically collapsed on the floor, and just thinking, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, what do I do? What do I do? All these impossibilities popping into my head. And so it began this big trek to get to South America with my other daughter. My son stayed behind to navigate anything that needed to be done from here in the States. And, but here's where kind of the cool part came. And in hindsight, I look back and I really have come to appreciate, thanks to this boulder, more than anything else, is that, first of all, there's definitely a magic out there when we allow it, but also that these things that look like they're going to be the experience that breaks us are often our biggest gifts.
Yeah.
Just disguised as these terrible challenges, right? And that's what it began evolving into for us almost immediately.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that's insane. That's intense. I always broke down into tears a bit, and I'm surprised you didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, I can imagine from that moment, it was extremely tough. And you're a full-time carer for her now, right?
I am. And it was interesting because a lot of my entire life tied together really in that first week. So the first leg was the trek to South America, and that meant we were turned away from the airport in Tampa, because we were arriving there at the airport within 45 minutes of when the plane was supposed to take off. And their policy, quote unquote, was for no reason at all to make an exception and let people, even if they didn't have luggage, we were not allowed on that plane. So we had to drive 5 hours to Miami, catch a plane there at 3 a.m., fly to Bogota, wait a couple of hours for another flight to take us to another city in Colombia, and then drive 4.5 hours to this teeny tiny little town where this hospital was in. So, but for me, what I discovered was that the inner game things that I had been inspired to really dig deeply into, and which had fascinated me from the time I was a child, it was all of this book knowledge that was given to me in, university and school, but no one was teaching us how to be happy. And and that became something that I was kind of obsessed with, is exploring, why do some people face these incredible challenges and they emerge an even more epic version of themselves, while other people just seem to stall out? And how can I make sure that I'm group number one and not group number two, right? So, but in the process, I'd had some things in my life that really were impossible at that time to feel grateful for. I had no idea why they had happened. And what I came to discover as things unfolded was that not only could I feel grateful for them, but I was almost indebted to them because of the immense challenge and practice that I had had from navigating through those challenges. And they had inspired me to look for more knowledge, to ask different questions, to work on myself in a different way. That now, fast forward to me where we'd flown her to Miami, where most of the work to put Schuyler back together took place. Mm-hmm. Now I could appreciate this, that, oh my goodness, if I hadn't endured that, if I hadn't lived through it, if I hadn't cried every tear, I would not be where I am now. So really, really decided to 100% invest in that inner game, because I realized that I had zero control over the outer game. But the worst negative emotion that I was feeling was feeling powerless. So where was the only place that I could find some hint of power so that I could help my daughter and actually feel like I was contributing? And that was in the mindset, in the inner game. And so from the moment that we touched down in Colombia, I was in a place of game on. I did not arrive at that hospital as, I was like, come on, this stuff is either real or it's not. And right now I'm going to invest and say it's real, because I have got nothing else, right? All of those outer game skills, the marketing, the branding, they weren't going to help me. So it really became this big campaign of the inner game, of finding the thoughts that would take it a little bit higher, and finding that place, one tiny thought at a time, of powerful expectation of knowing that we would be fine, whatever that new fine looked like. We would be fine. We would figure this out. And in the process of what happened, and this is how it led into the business ultimately that I have now, was 4 months later, she was released. However, we had another chapter to deal with. She was released, but she could not be left alone. She couldn't sit up by herself, right? Her balance had been compromised, to say the least. And so she was learning how to swallow again. She was learning how to talk again. She totally could not move herself from a couch to a wheelchair or anything like that. She totally needed 24/7 caregiving. So parallel to that was my sole business at the time was a talent agency. And the way that industry worked is that we booked contracts January through April. That's it. After that, the budgets were spent and you couldn't give away free shows even. I mean, it was insane, but that was the way the industry was. Well, this all took place February, March, April, May, into June, and we returned home in July. So guess what? I had zero income. And so I was terrified, and yet being terrified wasn't going to get me anywhere. So I had to look back and I had to go, wait a minute. Okay, so Schuyler survived the unsurvivable. And where was most of the influence? That was, you know, the differentiating factor was the mindset for us. So if the mindset could trigger a miracle with physical recovery and wellness, could it do the same thing financially? And plus, I became a different person to a certain extent, because now I felt, I like to say that that crazy boulder didn't come to teach me about death. It came to teach me how to choose to live. And so now all of a sudden I realized just how critical it was to feel that passion. How critical it is to know your purpose, live your purpose.
Yeah.
And so that became a high priority for me. So in the process of keeping people informed while we were in Colombia, and there were about 100 people around the world, I launched a page on Facebook called Sky is the Limit, spelled like her name, SCHUY. And however, because I was so invested in the energy and the focus, I was very specific about what this page had to be. We could not have people all over the world who are imagining Schuyler ready to die at any moment. This had to be a page of inspiration and empowerment. So I reached out to I was adamant there will be no pictures of Schuyler in the hospital. No way. The only pictures that go up of Schuyler are pictures from previously, her at her peak, right? Because that's how I want people to envision her, is, you know, larger than life, a superhero, right? And the message was, look, if you want to support us, then you go out and you be the best version of yourself. You be the one in the elevator who smiles at the strangers. You be the one who goes out there and does impossible things. You be the one who finds that inner Schuyler within yourself and go out and do something remarkable in her honor. And so what began to happen is that people began to share this page. And so it went from about 100 people to thousands of people, which is what led to more media coverage, and then led to people asking me to speak. And it was kind of like, excuse me, there's just a slight problem here. I have terrible stage fright. There's no freaking way. I book my artists on stages. I don't go on stages. And yet they were so persistent about all the people who really had been now reaching out saying, you know, these posts have really changed my life. The story has transformed our family, this, that. And so I realized that I had to find a way to be bold. So not only did I have to pick myself up from total financial devastation while I'm having to learn how to be a caregiver for my amazing child, the way through this appeared to be totally outside my comfort and familiar zone, right? And so I had to decide what I was willing to make this mean. And so I decided I would go to one training event and see. It's the first time I'd been away from Schuyler, and it was called Train the Trainer. And it was meant to train you how to start to become a speaker, or see if you want to become a speaker. And so I'm sitting in the audience and I'm still thinking, did I do the right thing? I'm not sure I want to be here at all. And so the trainer up on the stage goes into a story and finishes with a metaphor saying, if you're going to be content with making just a little bit of change in the world, then just go ahead and toss a pebble. However, if you want to create a tsunami of change, then you have to learn how to embrace your boulder. And literally in that moment, as you can imagine, tears start coming down. I look up and I'm like, okay, I freaking get it. All right. I will try. I will do this. I will commit to doing this. And so the next year, I worked really hard to get myself beyond not just beyond the stage fright, but to learn how to begin to deliver it like I wanted to understand that this was not to win over the haters. This was for the one person out there who something would click and it would help them transform their lives forever. That's why I was doing it. And so it began that step. About a year later, a fan recognized me out and about and asked me when I was going to put the post into a book. And I, of course, said to her, why do you want them in a book? They're on Facebook. And she was like, yeah, but time is passing and it's so great. Not everybody reads it. And so I went home that night. I kind of scratched my head and I went, huh, I guess I could. So I went on to Fiverr. I knew exactly what I wanted for the cover. I found someone who I thought could pull it off. 2.5 days later, I had the cover. I wrote two extra chapters. I took the first 4 months of posts, word for word, didn't change anything, popped them together, tossed them out to Amazon, and just, started letting people know, okay, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. The night that it came out, that's when I looked and there it was, right? The number one Amazon hot new release in one of the motivational categories. And, I got the distinction of having a screenshot of my cover with Eat, Pray, Love, Dalai Lama, a couple people. And I was like, yes, this has so been worth it. Right. And then from there, people said, okay, so, this is crazy. You have done this for yourself, for your own career. You pulled yourself out of the ashes while you've been a 24/7 caregiver. What is the formula? Could you teach that to other people? And initially at first it was like, well, I don't know if I could teach it to other people. And so I spent a few months really, really dissecting what was the formula. What exactly did I do? And it was pulling from some of the best mentors and teachers in the world that allowed me to do that. But the secret was not just the inner game, or not just the outer game, or not just saying, you have to have the right mindset, you have to believe in yourself. It was so much more than that in the inner game, right? It was a lot of little identification pieces and rebooting pieces that had to come together a certain specific way. So several months later, I decided to give it a whirl with some real people, not people who knew me, but actually people who knew the story and were interested in actually paying me to do this, so that there were no like doing any favors. They would be very, very honest and transparent whether this worked. And it worked really, really well. And so one thing led to another. And so now in COVID, when that performing arts business that I was actually able to revive. So I actually, if you think about it, I built this business while I was reviving the other business, being a 24/7 caregiver, but it was that formula that helped me do it. And so right now during COVID, when we are recording this, that industry is basically, it's like Rip Van Winkle. It is sleeping for a couple of years. However, this one has really just taken off, and it's clearly my passion. I love doing it. I love how even often after the very first session with my client, they even look different. They look different. Their energy is different. The smile is different. their awareness level is so different. And to be able to help people get out of that sense of stuckness, that sense that it's impossible, I've tried everything, it's too hard, and help them learn that you don't have to control those uncontrollable things. In fact, it's kind of none of your business to control those things. Everything you need is right in here, and with the other wisdom that we have available that spans back thousands of years. And when we slow down and begin applying it, it truly is magical things happen. So, da-dum.
I mean, you just feel like you're just like, I just leave you on a stage. No wonder you can speak on stages. Just get you out there. So I just want to know, like, the question that all of the listeners are thinking is, how is Schuyler now?
Yes. Oh my God. So Sky, the star of the story, she's amazing, right? So she has been a study in why not to get so obsessed and distracted with this big goal, I'll be happy when goal, but to break it down into these little tiny microscopic victories, because then you celebrate 1,000 victories as opposed to one fleeting success, right? And so she has, I mean, it's been amazing for me. I've been able to watch my child work at learning to walk for a second time in her life, right? So so now in her physical therapy, we use this robotic suit because I realized that part of the challenge for Sky, since her balance was impacted so dramatically, was that she was having to cognitively think about each and every step, because she never was able to really duplicate stepping correctly regularly enough for it to become muscle memory, right? So it made it feel like, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to figure this out. You know, step, shift, where's my balance? Ugh. It was just formidable. However, with the robotic suit, what it helps her do is have the identical strides and her gait and it won't let her pick up her leg until her weight is shifted. So the repetition of that has really, really helped. And we discovered this other product, Box Life, that is like a sleeve and these incredible socks that stimulate your brain, even if you don't have a traumatic brain injury. You know, if you're just an athlete, it really gets things going. So it's made her progress speed up even more. So she's gotten to the place where she definitely can eat by herself. Her speech, you can understand her now. She can almost transfer herself from the couch to the wheelchair by herself. And then with a gait belt, someone spotting her, she can walk short distances on a walker. We can spot her with a gait belt. She can walk up a small flight of stairs and down a small, as long as she has some things to hold on to, right? Yeah. Because the problem isn't strength. But probably most importantly, though, is that even though it was a direct hit, cognitively, she's still amazing. Her spirits are fantastic. We don't know if it's temporary, but that creative part of her mind that is also responsible for the inner narrative is quiet. So it's probably a blessing for her right now. But she continues to absolutely rock it. Will it be a long adventure for us? Probably. It looks like it. But again, who's counting, right? I mean, we just still that we still are seeing the progress, and the goal isn't to get things back to normal, it's to get them forward to the place where she can be focusing on her passion, her purpose, and find that new variation of joy that will allow her to live the new dreams and possibilities in her life. That's the goal.
Yeah. And I'm guessing that you've done like the things that you do with your clients that you've done with her as well.
Mm-hmm. And fun thing, I was a huge fan of Esther Hicks. I have been for a long time. The only variation is that I view the word attraction itself as a contraction for several words, attracting the right action. So the law of attraction. And actually, I've been such a fan that I've been in her hot seat 4 different times, including having had the opportunity to get upstage. I knew I would go. I knew I would be out on the stage to thank her because really so much of what I was able to do around Schuyler, I credit to what I learned from Abraham Hicks. And it really is, it's the funniest thing. I mean, I got there at the Abraham Hicks event with a book that I'd had Schuyler sign to Esther. And I mean, because I just knew. And so I have a way of chatting with people, not that you could probably guess that. So when I'm in the right environment, right? So I was chatting with this random person who was very interesting. And so we ended up finding a seat next to each other, grabbed a little bit of breakfast. So it was like, move fast, sit down. All of a sudden, Esther is coming out on stage, and I had the feeling that I would be first. And then I realized as she came on stage, oh, I never signed the book. I was like, oh my gosh, I never signed the book. So I'm like, do I pick up the book now and sign it? And I was like, no, I put it down. So she does her thing. And then she called the first people up into the hot seat. And it wasn't me. It was a couple, actually. But then she comes and she's like looking over, and it's like she looks directly at me and she goes, there's something brewing over here, but not yet. And the guy sitting next to me said, she was talking about you. And I went, yeah, I think she was. So we come to a break, and this nice guy goes back and gets me a hot tea. I pick up the book, grab my pen, and sign it. And I'm like, okay, now I'm ready. I put it down. She comes back on stage. Oh, guess who's first? So she points to me, pulls me, invites me up to her hot seat. And I had the opportunity to just really thank her and share with her what an amazing role that had played for me. And, there's just so much wisdom right here, accessible to all of us. And when we learn how to apply that and are willing to be open and be coachable, and the secret is to be connected, right? I mean, because I credit my quick progress, and I feel like it was relatively quick, to having mentors, to having coaches, to saying, wait a minute, I don't want to just do trial and error, because it's like Einstein said, you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it, right? You need some other perspectives, some other insights. And that's what now I get to do with my clients, right? Is to give them a bird's eye view into what's been hiding in their blind spot in plain view. They just are not expecting to see it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's the best thing about mindset, right?
Yep.
That most of us are so blind to actually what's going on in our minds that sometimes we just need someone to open that up and open up the flower and start peeling away the layers.
Right. And that's why, you know, I work with some people who are like, you know, I've read the books, I've watched the videos, and I just feels like I've tried everything. It just doesn't work for me. And they'll say a couple things that are always like big triggers. And one of them is, you know, I try to think positively. I try to look on the bright side, and I'll stop them and say, let's play with this for a minute. When you're trying to look on the bright side, where is your focus? Mm-hmm. Well, it's on the bright side. Is it really? Mm-hmm. Not really. Your focus, there would not be a bright side if your focus was not on this huge looming dark side, right? So, and what you focus upon, whether you state it into fact or not, you're going to create more of, right? So it's understanding that you can't see what you don't expect to see. You can't believe what you don't expect is possible. So my job when I work with people is to really help challenge them to make the choice of the I'm possible as opposed to the impossible, and to really see how they can translate some of this awareness into real action, what it really looks like, what it really sounds like. How can you change a story that to you says, well, but that's real. Of course that is real to you right now, but let's play with this for a minute. I can give you another version that's also real, but it's an empowering version, right? And it doesn't mean standing in front of a mirror saying I'm a money magnet, right? I mean, for some people that might work, but if your mind doesn't 100% believe in it, it's the looking on the bright side again. You're focusing, I'm doing this affirmation because nothing else the frick has worked, right? So you're focused on the lack of the presence of what you're trying to attract, and you're going to get more lack of that presence every single time. Mm-hmm. So it's powerful stuff. But then when you reboot and get out of your way, you can't forget about the outer game skills. That's where you have to figure out what are you going to do with it, right? So you identified your purpose. How are you going to get it out there in a powerful way? Are you going to be on podcasts? Are you going to have your own podcast? What kind of platform are you going to have? What kind of branding? How do you put that together, right? And how do you get this irresistible LinkedIn profile if that's where you're going? That's important too. So it's from the inner world to the outer world, and really discovering what it means to live as the most epic version of yourself. And that's, I mean, I couldn't feel more blessed for this boulder, for giving me multiple gifts, my child, again, evolving into who knows how she's going to, pardon the pun, but rock this world. And then having the opportunity humbly to be able to see people unfold right in front of my eyes, just from a few little tweaks in the right places, right? It's amazing.
And so I've got a couple of questions before we finish that I'd like to ask you. Now, one of those questions is going to be, what's the biggest challenge that you've faced? Now, obviously, everything that you've said so far is quite the array of challenges, if I say so myself. But I would really like more of a specific one, like obviously, one, is it finding out that had happened to Skye? Was it finding a way of having to get there in the travel? Was it getting there and seeing her and figuring out what to do? Was it bringing her home and deciding to, care for her? Was it starting up your business? Or was it after that? Or was it something completely different that we haven't even spoken about yet?
Right. Yes. That, to your point, that is a tough question to answer concisely, but I'll pick a less obvious one. I mean, clearly the whole thing with getting the news about Schuyler, I mean, that's in a whole different league of challenging than most challenges. So I'm going to pick something that I'm guessing more of your listeners will have personal experience with. And that really was the challenge of, and it kind of, I guess, blanketed into maybe all of these categories, and to feeling that I wasn't big enough for the challenges that were in front of me. I wasn't worthy. I hadn't done anything that particularly remarkable. I certainly was not wealthy enough to be able to believe that I was going to be able to afford her care. It was really struggling with my own shame. Should I have been more in order to tackle this? And then to make it through the physical thing, only to discover that I had another really big thing, and that was I had no idea where my next dollar was going to come from. And that was so humiliating, and there was no way. It felt like I had to choose between my daughter and an income source. I certainly couldn't go and get a job, because how would I pay for someone? I mean, it was just like, oh, what do I do? Can I, and are my gifts, do they mean anything in this modern world, right? And so it was really having the courage and having the tenacity to stay committed to the vision that not only will this work, but it will be epic, and to then break it down into that first step. Okay, what can I do? What can I do right now? What can I do? And how can I recognize and set up kind of a finish line for myself, a small one first that I could cross, and then another small one that I could cross, and to really get myself into a mindset of, I can do this, and this is doable, and again, it'll be worth it, right? And until I could get that taken care of, the outer game stuff would have been a waste of time.
Yeah.
Right.
Amazing.
Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Sure does. Love it. Okay, so our next question is, what's the scariest thing that you've ever done?
Ooh, scariest thing. Oh. there have been some scary things. I mean, but probably the scariest thing that I've ever done that I had no idea it was going to be scary. There's some things that I knew were going to be scary that I've done, but probably the scariest thing that I had no clue would be that scary would be spending, was it 2 hours? I think it was probably 2 hours in an inipi, which is a Native American sweat lodge, which is like, it's like an igloo, but made with like thick fabric. So they get steaming hot coals inside of it, close you in the total dark with everybody else, just wall to wall people. They start chanting,
are you standing?
Hitting the drum really hard, and you're in there. You get a few little breaks in between, but it is so hot and so dark and loud that it felt total terror.
Are you
as if
standing up
I'm
or
going to die. You're sitting down or you can lie down, but you've got the hot coals. Just, I mean, it used to be a rite of passage for like the
Right.
warriors. And
I was just gonna say, why
one of the
do you
most
do
scary,
that?
intense things I've ever done. Yeah,
Right.
it was crazy. There were some moments when, I mean, it took every ounce of my focus to keep me calm from freaking out. Well, I don't even know. I don't think it's fair to say that I was calm. To keep me focused and not absolutely freaking out, screaming, saying, I got to get out of here. I can't be in here. Right. It was amazing.
What was your intention with doing that?
My intention was I was actually at something called a warrior camp.
Mm-hmm.
And it was to really deepen my understanding of the power of our minds
Mm-hmm.
and the strength of our minds, especially when we're bumping up against things that we are afraid of,
Mm-hmm.
that evoke fear within us, and how when we can push beyond that, and we can, it's a whole different perspective on the world in as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, at
Cool.
that same event, I overcame my self-definition, which was validated by my body physiologically, that I had a fear of heights. So we had another couple of things that were height oriented, and I went into bed the night before terrified because I knew it was going to be the next day. And I knew that I had extreme vertigo. My heart would start pounding. My palms would start sweating. I would start crying. I mean, I was just like, I was a low level sort of person. So I lay on that bed, and this was after Schuyler's accident. And I lay in bed and I thought, what am I going to do? And with this whole group, I don't want to be sobbing. I don't want to slow this whole group down. What do I do? And so then again, I went back to asking myself some different questions. One of them was, what if? Because people had called Schuyler a mini-me, and yet she had no fear. I thought, well, what if I'm mistaken? What if I don't have a fear of heights? What if I've just at some point picked up conditioning that made me believe that I do? What if that feeling is actually exhilaration? What if I could love that? What would that be like? So anyway, I went there the next day and I decided to play with that idea. What if I love this? And no one in the entire group had any idea other than they thought that I did climbing on a regular basis. And there were some crazy things that we were asked to do at heights, and they asked me to help other people in my group and manipulate that. They had no idea until afterwards when we were all sharing our takeaway. I said, well, my biggest takeaway was that when I stepped here, I believed that I had incredible fear of heights. I mean, so it's things like that can be very, very powerful.
And I speak on that a lot because I have a lot of people who tell me, they're nervous or they're anxious or they're scared of doing something. And I've said, the only reason you think that is because you're determining it with a physiological body reaction that's happening. And
Right.
actually, why don't you just change that and just say that, those nerves are actually, they are excitement, or they're, whatever else. Like, I guess same with like speaking on stage, right? People
Right.
feel fear from speaking on stage and shake, and even doing like live videos or recorded videos will you'll hear it in their voice. And actually, maybe that's just excitement, and maybe that's just what you're creating is so fun and exciting and new and different, that you're just putting an idea of what you've been told into practice, which actually might not be true.
Right, absolutely. And I think so often we, if we're not aware of it, we can mistake fear for just lack of familiarity.
Yes.
Right? It's just unfamiliar. It's not fear, it's unfamiliar.
Yeah.
That's all.
Especially if we've never done it before, right? How do we know?
Right.
What's the worst that could
Exactly.
happen?
Exactly.
Okay, my last question. What advice would you give to our listeners from everything that you've learned and everything that you do with clients?
I think that probably the biggest piece of advice is not to let anyone convince you that impossible is anything more than temporary. And definitely don't let the person who's convincing you that something is impossible be yourself. Right? I mean, that what if should be the words that little phrase that you hold closest to your heart.
Yeah.
And realize that, to me, mindset is when your desire to create a miracle becomes greater than your desire to give in. So keep going, believe, persist, and choose to live a life that's I'm possible versus impossible.
Love it.
Absolutely.
Love it. Amazing. Thank you so much. What a star. I mean, the both of you. So cool to hear your story in depth, and what a privilege to have you with us today. So thank you so much for coming and joining me for this conversation. I cannot wait to share this with the rest of the world and the listeners, and I know that everyone's going to lose their mind over it. So amazing.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much to your listeners for joining us and cheering us on, right?
Absolutely. So where can our listeners find you if they want to find out more information about you and obviously everything that you're doing? What's the best place to find you?
Sure. Well, the first thing that I would encourage your listeners to do, if this resonates with you at all and you are in a place where you believe that you are destined for more, or you're struggling with your passion or your purpose, reach out to me by setting up a 20-minute kind of find your powerful future now strategy session. It's completely complimentary, and we can really, really help to maybe give you some clarity. And you can do that by going to bit.ly/power-future. And I'm sure you'll have that in the program notes, but that's bit.ly/power-future. Or just join me on my website, which is gritmindsetacademy.com. And if you want to cheer both Schuyler and me on, I would invite you to visit us on Facebook at that Sky is the Limit page, which is SCHUY is the limit. And introduce yourself, tell us where that you heard us here. And if you like this episode, make sure that you find someone to share it with. We'd so love that.
Absolutely. And I will put all that information in the show notes so that anyone who's looking for that can dive in there and find everything about you. And amazing. And your book as well. Where can they find your book?
So our book is on Amazon. I'll give you the link to put that down there. But it's called The Sky is the Limit. That's spelled more like a traditional sky. SKY, The Sky is the Limit, by Meredith, Hankenson, Alexander. And you'll find that on Amazon. Audiobook as well. Yes.
Oh, good times. All right.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of people who are going to want to share this and share your story and also connect with you as well. So I'm excited for that. When this comes out.
It was so much fun being on this podcast with you. So thank you so much. And go out there and be the epic version of yourself, right?
Be the epic version of yourself.